I mean, we thought 2 or 3 weeks ago that the Mueller investigation was wrapping up. I think that was probably a head fake. It was announced this week that his investigation is funded to September. I guess it's possible that they would take some wind down time, but it appears to me that we're ongoing, and that this week will prove to have been revelatory in terms of not just Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn, but also Roger Stone and Rick Gates. What's happening with this week that implicates those two?
Well, I think what people have been looking for is to see whether or not the Rick Gates case. He was Paul Manafort's top deputy. He also worked on the inauguration, and he was in and out of the White House the first 5 or 6 months of the Trump administration, working with Tom Barrack, who is a good friend of Donald Trump's and who also ran the inauguration. So Gates was, so Gates was involved with all of this stuff. He's one of those guys that had, access in the campaign, the transition, the inaugural, and the White House afterwards. So he's had a lot of information to share. So his sentencing, if it is, if Mueller had decided to continue his sentencing and say, we come back, he's still cooperating, we need more information from him. It kind of indicates that maybe the Mueller case isn't winding up quite as quickly as everybody says. Right. As for Stone, this is going to be, they're going to set a trial date for him. The government has asked for the fall. So I think it's October, and people are saying, well, if he's going to do that, he's obviously not winding up. But it's not necessarily true, because he's put a couple of D.C., U.S. attorneys on the case who may be able to pick it up if Mueller winds up. So here you have, and just to sort of give an overview again, just very quickly, we had 4 top associates of Donald Trump: Manafort, Gates, Roger Stone, and Michael Flynn, all of whom were in the very top levels of Trump intimacy and association, appearing before federal judges in 1 week. And, you can say there's no witch hunt, but, there's an awful lot of, people flying around on brooms. And, it's kind of hard to say that there's nothing going on here when you've got all that happening in 1 week's time.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. This is it's a silly exercise at this point, but just the idea that, Barack Obama would be president and David Axelrod would be going to jail, and I don't know, John Podesta would be, awaiting sentencing, and Bill Burton and the rest of them would all be Gibbs would all be awaiting arraignment, or
Valerie Jarrett.
Yeah, I mean, it's Reverend Wright would have been with him working in the White House, and then it's just mind-boggling to contemplate
foreign policy. Yeah.
Right. It's mind-boggling to contemplate where we're at this juncture. All right. Well, look, I want to turn attention to, and I don't know if we're going to have enough time to talk about it. We can maybe talk about it in the next segment as well. Earlier this week, well, you know what? Let's save that. We'll save that for the next segment, because I want to talk about Nancy Pelosi's impeachment proclamations, and I think it's highly problematic because of certainly lessons that I think we've learned from the past here. But before we get to that, and we'll get to that in the next hour, we also know this week that we still have yet to, even in any way, implicate Jared Kushner, Javanka, Jared and Ivanka and Junior. I mean, all of this stuff with Manafort in New York, and certainly with Cohen in particular in New York, because there's got to be, right? If they've got, if Cyrus Vance has been lining up 15 indictments with Paul Manafort, he's certainly got a bunch for Cohen too, right?
I would think so. I would think so. This is, this is sort of the nexus of the, well, it isn't sort of, it is. It's the epicenter of the Trump crime syndicate. And there are any number of tentacles there. I mean, look, we've read about this stuff for years. I mean, just everything from tax evasion to, insurance fraud and, the hiring of undocumented workers and payoffs and, the list, it goes on and on and on of potential crimes. And I mean, of course, looking at the big picture here, again, just as it was with Paul Manafort, you have to wonder, how did Trump get away with all this stuff all these years?
Yes.
I mean, he may have hit the wall now, but it took him becoming president of the United States before anybody went, maybe I ought to take a look at this guy. What's going on here? And you can only imagine what other people are doing if he's been doing this. So, this is a very revealing moment in our system. I mean, for a lot of reasons and in a lot of different ways. But, I mean, this idea that all these people have been basically working, they've been conducting their business on a criminal basis and been lauded for it and, being invited to all the best parties and everything else. And, it's clear that this was a criminal enterprise. So, Javanka, I mean, there is something so wrong on so many levels with the Javanka story. And, of course, there's this new book out about them and the way that they have been in the White House. Just that alone, the fact that they have this nepotism. I mean, if there's ever been a better illustration of why nepotism is wrong, I don't think there's ever been one. I mean,
I think you're absolutely right. Well, listen, when we come back in the next hour, let's talk about impeachment. And then, of course, we've got a lot of legislation on the burn. There's a lot of things happening. We'll talk about all of them in the third hour. Digby, if you'll join me. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. We'll be right back.